Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, we're going to talk about this quarterback situation as we're getting ready for the Steelers' final preseason game. Russell Wilson talked about Arthur Smith's offense. I want you to hear what he had to say. We'll discuss that with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com, as well as Beanie Bishop. He looks like he's coming back. And who are some of the players you should be looking out for to make the final 53-man roster? All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Alan Saunders. He's back on the show. Alan, we got to talk more quarterback situation. I've been talking a lot of offensive line this week. I've been talking a lot of, little things here and there, but there's still all this talk nationally about who's going to be QB1. We'll get into that in a little bit. But we talked to Russell Wilson, and one thing you and I think, agreed upon, like even outside of, X's and O's, execution in preseason games, Russell Wilson talks like he's the QB1, like in not in a way that it's like there's any ambiguity about this. This is straight up this case here. What are some of the things that tip it hat off to you? Like this isn't as close as some people in the national media want would think that want to make this out to be.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we should read that much into the way Russell Wilson talks and acts. He does talk and act like he is the starting quarterback. He also has been the starting quarterback for his entire NFL career. I'm not sure he knows another way to talk and act.
Good point.
And if I was Russell Wilson, I would feel pretty good about me being the starting quarterback, because I think he's been the better of the two quarterbacks. So like he hasn't been given any reason to think that he won't be, so that he should start acting like something that he isn't. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess in some ways I'm agreeing that I think Russell Wilson is likely to be the starting quarterback. I'm just not sure like it's because of his actions. I don't know. If he was out there struggling, I could see Russell Wilson kind of being the same way. Like we heard about in Denver when things didn't go well, and he was still this guy that was like upbeat and positive and happy-go-lucky. Like he could be losing this quarterback battle, and he might still act that way. But he definitely is acting like he's the starting quarterback, and I haven't seen anything that makes me think he's not going to be.
Yeah. Again, this is not a slight towards Justin Fields. This is an acknowledgement of who Russell Wilson is, why they got him in the first place, and why he's going to be a plug and play guy they feel for this offense. And listen, I feel for Steelers fans who are like we just want to see it. We want to see it on the field. And I think, and I hear that out too. But I think what people will eventually realize when things actually start to happen is that what you're seeing right now in preseason, and I've talked about this a couple times this week now, what you're seeing right now in this preseason is all sort of build-up. It's all experiments. It's trying things out. And Russell Wilson even talked a little bit about that, not just that, but also what he likes about Arthur Smith's offense. I want y'all to listen to Russell Wilson as he talked before practice for the Steelers on Wednesday at the Southside facility. Also, shout out Alan Saunders for helping me get this video, because I was working on the pit beat at the time. But here's Russell Wilson talking about just that.
Russ, you guys threw underneath the sticks pretty consistently on third down. We're just working on reads, just seeing what Freiermuth or Warren could do.
I think it's pretty simple. We had guys running past the sticks and all that. Just the problem is when they know that's happening, it's 3rd and 15. It's pretty easy on the defense. They cover, they just kind of sit there and everything else. You got to check it down. And we almost got a couple first. Pat almost got the first one there, or the second one or whatever. But
I think Warren almost got his.
Yeah, he almost got his too. But I'm looking to drive the ball in there, but sometimes you don't want to force. We're not forcing turnover, especially when it's early in the game. If it's fourth quarter and it's the last play of the game, then yeah, you have to thread the needle. But early in the game, it's about field position. It's about moving the sticks and trying to find a way to get a first down. We got talented guys. You got to trust the guys you have around you. We got a guy like Jaylen Warren, who's one of the top, missed tackle guys. You give him the football, he makes plays. So you just trust your reads, trust your timing, and do that.
Russ, what do you feel like you learned about Arthur Smith, having a game with him in your ear, on the sideline, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it was cool to be in the game the other day, and just his communication. I think Coach Smith, Coach Arthur Smith, just did a really good job of communicating. I think he's really poised in the games. I think also how he teaches from the practice field, obviously the game field, all that matters and everything else. So I'm really enjoying it and ready to get after it this week.
So, Russell Wilson talking there, and I think the acknowledgement of fitting into the role that he's being asked to fit for the Steelers. This is a big part of what I've been talking about for some time, Alan. Russell Wilson knows what he's supposed to be. He's not in Pittsburgh to be the superhero. He's not in Pittsburgh to be the guy that's going to lead the offense to 5,000 yards passing. He's to play to their system, get the job done, get the ball out on time, and work it. And also understand where, what Arthur Smith's ultimate goal is for how this offense is to play throughout this season. And I think all of that also plays into why Russell Wilson is QB1 still, is because where Justin Fields still has to show that he can do that on a winning team, that he can just come in, understand, and operate the offense to help win games. That's all Russell Wilson has done. And I will continue to repeat this. The last time Russell Wilson was, lighting it up in the NFL was on a team with a really good defense and, a strong run game without, superstar receivers. So, I look at this and I hear Russell Wilson talk, and it just all adds up to me that there's good reasons why he's QB1, other than just, Fields bad, him good. This is not just a feeling. This is not just there's a lot of things stacking up in his favor.
This quote that you played, which I thought was interesting that you picked that out, because I thought that was the most interesting thing he said too. Mm-hmm. You don't want to force. We're not forcing turnovers, especially when it's early in the game.
Yes.
It's the fourth quarter. It's the last play of the game. Then, yeah, you've got a man to thread a needle. But early in the game, it's about field position. It's about moving the sticks and trying to find a way to get a first down. This is like if Mike Tomlin played quarterback, the answer that we would get from him about this. This is perfect alignment with the football philosophy of the head coach, in that they just do not want to turn the ball over. They want to take care of the football. They are perfectly comfortable as a football team playing games that are 3-3 at halftime. They are perfectly comfortable punting repeatedly. Their third biggest free agent acquisition this offseason was a punter. Okay, so there's not this urgency. And I think it's very telling that a lot of the people that you see, I think especially nationally, talking about, why wouldn't they play Justin Fields, are people who are approaching the game from the offensive perspective.
Right.
And the Pittsburgh Steelers are not. And they are approaching the game from, how are we going to win? We are going to win because we think we have the best defense in the NFL, as long as our quarterback doesn't screw it up for us. And that is why Russell Wilson is the guy, because he's the guy that's not going to screw it up. And that's, to me, that's the whole quarterback conversation here boiled down into one clip.
No, I agree. And part of it is too, when you're thinking about protecting the football, this team is still a defensive heavy team. Like, as much as there's excitement, and we've focused a lot on the offensive line and the run game and Russell Wilson and George Pickens and Justin Fields and all these guys, and there's reason to be excited about some of the things there. But this is still a team where the majority of its money is invested in the defense. A majority of its talent is in the defense. TJ Watt's still the best player on this team. Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, even Patrick Queen, factor is that Alex Highsmith factors into that. You look at the top players in the team, they're mostly on the defensive side of the ball. So yeah, the offense's job is not to lose the game, but also to be efficient enough to not put too much pressure on the defense to have to be completely immaculate all the time. You expect the defense to play very well to even be elite, but sometimes the Steelers have lost games even when their defense was elite. And I think the goal of this offense is to make it even easier on them, while also while also being efficient at times to kind of make sure that they're not being asked to do too much.
Yeah, it's not that the Steelers don't want to have a good offense. Mike Tomlin was their head coach when they had the best offense in the league, when they had a 5-year run of consecutive top 10 offenses. They're perfectly, it's not like this is some, big picture, we just want to play muddy football. Like that, he's perfectly fine with having a great offense and trying to have it lead a so-so defense into the playoffs. They took that approach for a couple of years there. It just so happens that right now they have a great defense and a so-so offense, and they're acknowledging that fact and asking the offense to take care of the football and not screw it up for the defense and run the ball and be like multi-dimensional. Like I think that's the thing we're probably not talking about enough about this. Everything that we're talking about is negative with this offense from these 2 preseason games is about the passing offense. They haven't really run the ball that much. I don't really think they should feel like they need to run the ball that much. They unfortunately got Jaylen Warren banged up. They really can't afford to get Najee Harris banged up. That they should feel pretty comfortable running the football, that they're going to be pretty good at it. They're working on the passing game, so that's why they're doing it a lot. But if their run-pass ratio in the regular season looks like it has in the preseason, they're going to lose. Like there's no question about that. They will have to run the ball more than they have. So, we're seeing them play up their weakness sort of semi-intentionally here, when I don't think we're going to see that in the regular season.
No, I'm right with you here. Also, just a nugget here that I was looking this up. When the Steelers at least tie in turnover margin in the last 4 seasons, just doing this quick math here, I think they're 39-9. So like that's a pretty good record. And again, that's not just winning, that's not just dominating, that's tying turnover margin. So like that's part of what Russell Wilson's getting at here, is that if you just do that, this team can win pretty well. Also, when they lose the turnover margin, I don't think they've won in the last 4 years. Like not once have they come back. Have they come back from that? So like you look at that, I think it paints a pretty clear picture why Russell Wilson's QB1, what his goals are, and how it fits into what Arthur Smith's trying to do.
Yeah, I think so, and I think listen, I'm someone that I enjoy watching offensive football. I would be perfectly happy to cover a team that was going to win or lose 55-45 every game. That would suit me just perfectly, but that is just not in the cards for this team right now. And I think like playing Justin Fields, while might honestly make for better offense, but it's not going to make for the kind of complementary football that I think this team needs to reach its maximum potential.
Absolutely. I want to talk more about this with Alan Saunders here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carr with Alan Saunders. We still want to talk. I want to talk about Beanie Bishop. It looks like he might be coming back soon. What does he do? What's his holdback from being an injured, undrafted rookie for a little bit here? All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you can download to your phone today to buy tickets to all your favorite events. With summer winding down, fall is almost here, which is a great time to see a lot of live concerts, football games, and get ready for the Major League Baseball playoffs. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One of those deals is the 50% off Labor Day tickets for Diamondbacks versus Dodgers. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. One feature I love is the Super Deal, where it finds you a combination of the best seat for the best price available, whether that's the front row at a concert or club seats at a big game. Plus, the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let's talk a little Beanie Bishop. We got to catch up with him a little bit after the Wednesday practice this week. He didn't play in this last game. He didn't delve too much into it, said it was a coach's decision to not play him. But I get the sense that Beanie Bishop is still in a good place to be playing a prominent role in the Steelers slot, despite that situation. I know there's always the questions that you ask, like naturally, like, wait a second, he's a rookie. Is him not playing endanger him? And I'm not saying that he doesn't have to do anything, but I still think he's on a pretty good track right now to be the Steelers' primary slot corner. What say you about Beanie Bishop standing right now?
Well, there's hardly anybody else. I don't,
Yeah.
It was interesting because after that first preseason game, we saw a lot of Graylin Arnold the next week in practice, and then he got hurt, and then Beanie got hurt, and then of course we saw Thomas Graham out there against the Buffalo Bills, and now it seems like we're going right back to Beanie. I don't know if that, Beanie wasn't great in that first preseason game. I didn't think it, was just okay. He talked today about, there was a lot of things I want to clean up. I want to be better. But I think, I don't know. I couldn't quite figure out if that Graylin Arnold thing was a dissatisfaction in Beanie or if it was just wanting to get a look at a guy who was right on the borderline of making the roster and seeing whether he's someone that's worth keeping. I think Beanie's on the team 100%. I'll say that. In terms of like how much he's going to play or how much, I think the real question will be, will they feel like they need to keep another player that can play in the slot, or are they just going to go with Beanie Bishop? Will that be Thomas Graham, or will they bring somebody else in? I don't know. I asked TA earlier this week about, hey, would you try Corey Trice or Darius Rush at nickel? And he kind of, said not really. So to me, that sounds like a lot of faith in Beanie Bishop. I think we'll know a lot more after we see him in another game and after we get through cut down day and see if Thomas Graham stays, then maybe that's not such a great sign. But I think he's on the team. I think he's suiting up in the opener. I think the only question is just how much he plays.
I agree. I also asked Beanie Bishop at one point about the complexities of the defense, because one thing the Steelers love to do, they love to disguise. And he talked about how, like, hey, that's what's expected to at the NFL level. He said Minkah Fitzpatrick and Cam Sutton have been in his ear a lot, helping him in practices and even in walkthroughs to be like, hey, press off here because we're trying to make them think that this underneath stuff's open, or press up here because we want him to try to chuck it deep a little bit, and one of our back guys will make a play on it. That's where I think Beanie Bishop is, and it sounds like he's receiving it very well. Whenever you talk to him, he seems to understand how what's important. He seems to understand that he's part of it, that he's here to be part of a system. Those are all positive things I think that line up in Beanie Bishop's favor if he's going to not just make the roster, because I feel like that's a given at this point unless he gets injured or something, but not just make the roster, but be a really good contributor to the roster.
Yeah, I think he can be a really good player. I'm not sure. There are going to be bumps in the road for a rookie, any rookie. There are going to be bumps in the road for Zach Frazier. There are going to be bumps in the road for Troy Fautanu if he plays. That's universal. I guess the question is, how much of that can the Steelers feel like they can afford to tolerate out of that position? It doesn't seem like the early season is particularly daunting in terms of like the matchups. So I think that's a good sign. For him to be able to sort of ease into it a little bit. He's not going to get the best. He's not getting Tyler Lockett week one, right? Like he's not getting like some guy who's out there that's just uncoverable. I think either Ray McLeod or Kadarius Hodge is going to be the slot wide receiver for the Falcons. Like those that's pretty manageable, right? And I don't even know who the Broncos have left on their team, but Marvin Mims, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
It's not anybody that's going to scare you like too badly that you feel like, oh my gosh, we can't put our rookie out there against him. Remember that conversation from last year, right, with Broderick Jones, where it was like it was Bosa and it was Myles Garrett and it was all these guys early in the year,
Max Crosby.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like I think it's about as ease into it as you're going to get for Beanie Bishop. So I think that's a pretty positive in his case as well.
I think so too. I think that he's done well. Like this is also, I'm not trying to when I'm talking about these mitigating factors, I'm not trying to minimize what he's shown in camp. I don't think he has not done what Mike Hilton did. I think it was 7 years ago now he would have came into the league. When he was there in training camp, it would have been the 2017 training camp. I want to say, like, I remember Mike Hilton was everywhere, and that was just ridiculous. But what Beanie Bishop has done is he's been consistent, and he's been in his place, and he's been able to contest, and he's been able to make plays. I've also seen him make some plays on special teams, which always helps. So I've liked what I've seen out of Beanie Bishop to the point that I think he'll fit in. And the fact that like the older guys are showing him like, hey, this is how you fit in with us so that you're not blowing up the disguises that we're setting up to create turnover opportunities. All of that bodes in his favor.
Yeah. I think the one thing that we'll see is how much they actually want to use a traditional nickel corner versus how much they want to use that big nickel, that heavy package with the three safeties. I think they've been talking that up a lot over the years. They really wanted to do it. And Casey broke his arm a couple of years ago. Last year, Minka was hurt. Neal was hurt. Three-quarters of the safeties on the team were hurt. I think all the safeties on the team were hurt at one point. They didn't really have the depth to do it. I think this year they're going to want to use the Sean Elliott in that role a good bit. So I'm not sure they're going to need Beanie to like be what Mike Hilton was and remember that was Mike Hilton's second time around too. He had a first year training camp. Where was he? New England before he came to Pittsburgh. So I don't think they need Beanie to like be that guy from week one. I think they can, because of the matchups, they can minimize it because the other packages they have that they can minimize, sort of the amount that they need from him right away.
Absolutely, Beanie's going to be a feature. We'll see how he does if he does get back to this preseason game, and what his role will be there. But either way, I envision him being an involved part of this defense, even early into the season. I want to talk about some of these other guys here. We're pretty sure about Beanie Bishop making the roster, but what about some of these guys that might not make the roster? Who are the guys that are fighting for something? We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you, this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot as the #1 sportsbook in America. Well, we have something a little different for you today. And now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook today. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get America's #1 sportsbook, and that is FanDuel. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're joined by Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, we're looking at fringe guys. It's the last preseason game, whereas the starters will play a big chunk of games, or a big chunk of this game. Excuse me. I do think that there are some guys that are pushing to make sure that they make the roster, whether they're guys that we think are already kind of in the final 53 and just making their final case, or guys that are just outside that are trying to say like, hey, either consider me for the final 53 or bring me back on that practice squad to keep me around for the year. Who are some of those guys that you've had your eyes on to make their case?
So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this college basketball bracketology style. Okay.
Oh, I like this. I like this.
I'm going to put on my Joe Lunardi hat or my Jerry Palm cap here. So I'm going to give the last three that I have on the 53. Okay. The guys that I have on the 53-man roster, but I think are the ones that have the most tenuous hold on a spot. Okay. And I'll say that's for me, Darius Rush. I have Ryan Watts in one of those spots.
Okay.
And I have, man, this is hard. I'll go with Mark Robinson as my three guys that are all right on the edge. And I will say this, I have 26 defense, 24 offense in the 53 right here. So that's why all three of those guys are on defense, because you could easily balance it 25-25. You're not going to have fewer than 24 on offense.
I like your thinking here. I want to say this about Mark Robinson real quick. I thought he looked very good in that second preseason game. He was hitting, he was flying, he was on special teams. That's the kind of stuff that they need him to do that he wasn't able to do. And on Miles Killebrew's interception, I think he would have played a big role in it.
Good coverage, yeah.
He pressed the tight end up the field, stayed on top of him. And yes, it's Mitch Trubisky. We've seen him miss a lot, but he pressed him so much, Mitch Trubisky had to like put it up a little bit high, and that forced the overthrow, which allowed for Miles Killebrew to make the interception. A lot of that stems from his good play. I think, like you're saying here, he's on the final 3. I think Mark Robinson makes the final 53 because I think that he's been doing enough on special teams on top of being that last effort linebacker guy to fit in there. Granted, I know they went and got Tyler Matakevich. That's kind of what he does. I think Mark Robinson's made a case for him to stay as well.
I think Mark Robinson has solidified his place with a really, really strong preseason. You know, I was when they signed Matakevich, I was like, well, Mark's done. Like that's the spot. Well, you knew you had him. Why would you sign? But I think he's just done such a good job. I don't know how you let him go, and I don't know who, like how you make that spot another way. So now I'll go the other way. The 3 that I have on the wrong side of the cut line that I think are the closest to a spot, I will say that I have Thomas Graham.
Okay.
Very close. I would say I have Jack Coletto. Very close. And I would say I have Dez Fitzpatrick very close. Those would be the 3 guys that I think are right there. I have not – they used a lot of fullback in the offense, but I don't think I've seen enough special teams work from Jack Coletto to put him on the 53 right now. I've got Scotty Miller as clearly a better wide receiver than Dez Fitzpatrick and on the roster, at least until they go trade for Brandon Ayuk.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare start that on this channel. We are not doing that today.
And Dez Fitzpatrick has been working as one of those top punt gunners, so he definitely has a chance to get. He's got to earn. To me, I think Fitzpatrick, Rush, Watts. That conversation is about the best 2 punt gunners of those 3 guys. I think that is how those guys make the team. And then Thomas Graham, I think, like we talked about, it's all about how much they feel like they trust Beanie Bishop. Do they need another slot? And if so, maybe that comes at the expense of a Rush or a Watts, who's a bigger guy who's more versatile for special teams.
I think that's a big question. Yeah, like you said, it's trying to figure out how do you want to comprise your secondary? Do you want 6 corners with 2 slots, or do you want 5 corners and 5 safeties with maybe some of those safeties being the help guys in the slot? When all's said and done, I like some of those picks. I think that the Steelers with a fullback. My only thing with Jack Coletto, man, is like fullback's just such a tough position to keep around when you got other needs. And I feel like Connor Hayward would be an interesting guy to put back there because we've seen him. He's making catches. He can go hit people. He can be a factor. I've liked what I've seen out of Jack Coletto. Heck, I remember when they signed him and they practiced with him for like a couple of days, like they were getting ready to do their second version of backs on backers. And I saw Najee Harris go to him and he was like, Jack, we need you today. Because he knew Jack Coletto was going to mess somebody up. And he did too. He's a physical bruiser. He fits that fullback role. And that fullback is fun, but how is that much worth into your roster spots, versus an extra corner, an extra wide receiver, an extra offensive tackle or interior lineman, or an extra defensive lineman when those are such important positions and you can maybe flex your 3rd tight end, Connor Hayward, into the fullback role.
Yeah, Michael Pruitt can play fullback too. He's done it in the past. So I think that's what's working against Coletto. And I'll say, if I got to give one more, if John Rice Plumlee is still out there with the first team kickoff return, I think we have to start to seriously consider whether he makes this team. And I'll say this about him and Coletto. Both of those guys are guys I would try to get to the practice squad. And maybe if you get the right matchup, you bring them up. You say, hey, this is the week, right? We need you for a specific kind of game. It's going to snow. We need Coletto. We're going to run the ball 50 times. Like, I can see that coming. And I just want to shout out a couple other guys that I can't make the math work for them to get to the 53-man roster, but I think have just played really, really well and deserve some attention.
Are any of them outside linebackers?
No. I think Kyron Johnson's on the 53. Okay.
Oh, you think he's not even the final 3. He's just in there.
Moon played 5 snaps in the second preseason game. Like, I thought that was going to be a competition. Right now, I don't even know if Moon's healthy.
Got it.
It seems like Kyron's got it. Jacoby Windman, man, his college is there's hardly any tape, right? He was injured. He got into a fight his last year at Michigan State and gets suspended for a bunch of games. There's not a whole lot to go on there. I didn't have any expectations for him. He's a big dude, so I just kind of assumed that he was just going to be like Landon Roberts Jr. and just hit people. Man, he can cover. He runs in space. He had a couple really nice interceptions in training camp. I've been really impressed by him. I think he's a guy that like should stick around and someone that they should try to get to the practice squad for sure. I think that Jonathan Ward is really impressed me, and we'll see about the health of Jaylen Warren. If they don't have him available for Atlanta, I think they need another running back besides the ones I have on the 53. I know Jonathan Ward's coming off a hamstring. I have no idea if he's 100%, but man, he's got some burst. Like when he gets through the line, there's a different gear that he has that the rest of those guys don't have. He's also very impressive in pass protection, which is really the thing you want from a guy in that role. If he had to be the Lightning to Najee Harris's Thunder for a game, I don't think that would be the worst situation in the world for the Steelers. And one more, a guy who's been here forever and I think never gets any love, Ryan McCollum, man. The Steelers don't have a traditional backup center. He's been getting a million reps. He's not been making a lot of mistakes. I thought he did okay in his one-on-ones at training camp against some pretty good competition. I think he's the guy they're going to want to lean on with. I mean, if you look at the backups on this offensive line, I mean, if Fautano's not healthy for week one, the top three backups are going to be Dylan Cook, they're going to be Spencer Anderson, and they're going to be Mason McCormick. 0 NFL snaps between those three guys. Ryan McCollum's been around. He's played some games. I think he's someone that could factor into it for this team going down the road. He's a good guy to keep around.
Absolutely. Great insights, Alan. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. You're amazing as always. Let people that can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. SteelersNow.com. At PGH Steelers Now is where all my written work lives, and you can find my podcast on the Steelers Now YouTube page or anywhere you find podcasts. Search for Steelers Morning Rush or Steelers Afternoon Drive.
Absolutely. Check out Alan Saunders. He's amazing. We appreciate you, Alan. We appreciate you all as well for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. This was your Thursday episode. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday. We got one more show before the final preseason showdown. We'll get you ready with that tomorrow. Tune back in here for the Locked On Steelers podcast.